On this episode, we're talking lighting, LED, and education at LDI 2017, right here on The Live Life.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box.
This is The Live Life, episode 30, LDI 2017 recap. Welcome to The Live Life, where we bring you influential guests in the live event audiovisual community, talking about topics related to the selling, planning, designing, producing, and delivering live event productions. I'm your host, Wallace Johnson, where you can find me on Twitter at WallaceCTS. And back on the show today is Doyle Martin, COO of TLS Production. Doyle, welcome back.
Well, thank you, sir. Good to be back.
Cool. So I wanted to do this episode to recap LDI. I did not get to go to the show this year, as I'm sure many AV tweets in the industry didn't. And so I wanted to get a few guests on, which some, again, due to busy schedules, had to cancel out. But want to get a recap of what the show was all about. So to kind of kick it off, what made you go to this year's show?
I tend to attend LDI every year. I'm pretty much there all the time. Part of it is reconnecting with vendors and getting in front of them, as well as, seeing what's new and what they're rolling out. And the other thing is, being a lighting guy by trade, it's a great chance for me to hook up and see people that I don't normally get to see on a regular basis anymore. So it's a little bit of an old homes day for all of us lighting geeks who are out there. So that's primarily it. Always lots of good new technology to look at and to view.
Yeah. Now, going to these trade shows, it is always like a family reunion of some sort of friends, former colleagues, and so on from the industry. So with that, there's a bunch of shows throughout the year. You got NAB, Infocom, CES, Digital Science Expo, Plaza when they're here in the States and things like that. What makes this show different from the other shows?
This show is far more lighting intensive than any of the other shows. If you really want to get a handle on what the new lighting fixtures can do and what the manufacturers are throwing out, this is the best show to go to, because all of the larger manufacturers, the big manufacturers whose stuff we all want to buy, do really big, expensive booths and really big, nice light shows, so you can really get a feel for what the instruments are capable of. The nice thing is, most of them bring in outside of their company professional designers to actually design the shows. So you get a take not only on what the manufacturer thinks the fixtures can do, but you get to see what a real lighting programmer, lighting designer can do with those fixtures when you give them the opportunity. So it's a really nice on that level.
Yeah, I noticed that. I remember the first year I went to NAB, and I had seen Sony's booth at Infocom for years, and then I saw their booth at NAB, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, when they get to their specialty market and they got a show that can highlight that, the scale, design.
Oh yeah, well, it's like E3 for the technology companies. A lot of the gaming companies show at a lot of the smaller technology shows, but unless you've been to E3, you just don't see what they really put their money into. The way they really blow it out.
Absolutely.
So it's every segment of industry has its own great big show. So, and this is just the lighting industry's great big show. I would actually be surprised if it didn't. It seems to be moving in the direction of rolling together with NAMM, which is probably would be a really good mix. So we'll see what happens in the future. With the Pernelli show moving to NAMM and a lot of those live event guys having to now decide between, do I go to LDI or do I go to NAMM and the Pernellis? I think we might see a little bit of a convergence between those two shows, but we'll see what happens. Who knows?
You bring up an interesting point, because like the dates of LDI always stunk to me. I'm like, it's still like the busiest point of the year, and I know it's a weekend show, but it's still timing's off. And then NAM's at the beginning of the year, right? Like January-ish,
Mm-hmm.
February.
Yep.
So with the timing of that, and then LDI also, there's some audio vendors there, right? As well.
There are a few audio vendors. The floor is primarily lighting and rigging.
Yep.
In recent years, there's a lot of LED product.
Yep.
Probably too much LED product, but that's up to someone else to decide. But there's a lot of LED product. There's a little bit of sound product, but it is primarily lighting and rigging, with some set thrown in. I mean, Rose Brand has a big presence there. Projection has become a bigger deal there. So like Daylight has a fairly decent booth there. Some of the other screen vendors have a decent booth at LDI because of the projection tie-in with lighting these days.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, it's still pretty much a lighting and rigging floor.
Okay. But no, that's a good thought in terms of combining those two shows. I think you get the same type of audience, just from the different perspectives and bringing it together to make a bigger show in combination. And speaking of the,
it would be an interesting live event show if they were to find a way to combine the two shows. It would make it a live event destination without a doubt. Both shows already are in their own right, but you put the two together and, there wouldn't be a roadie trying to get to them in the country.
How about to say the Geek Fest grows, right?
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. So speaking of audience, like we talk about the two shows, so particularly with LDI, what individuals in terms of roles and skill sets should be going to the show to check things out?
It's one of the things that it's kind of unique about LDI is they get a really nice, broad group of people who come. You see everything from high school and college students who are, just starting out in the business, who are coming to start getting an idea of what's actually out there, to the seasoned professionals who have been in it forever, who are really there to meet manufacturers and get the lowdown on what the new gear is. You also get people from different segments. So there's the worship segment. You get a lot of folks from the worship market at LDI taking a look at. It's a great place for those people to be able to actually get a good broad view of the lighting technology where they really can't anywhere else. So it's attendance wise, there's room for pretty much anybody who has an interest in that lighting and rigging segment of the market.
Cool. So I know you were there with yourself and a couple other, folks that and part of your team and everything like that. What were you excited about seeing going into the show? Did you have any expectations of what you were looking for?
I really didn't this year. I am kind of at the point now. Now, part of this is because where I'm at in my career, I'm not the designer geek I used to be. So I'm not hanging on every new function of every new light the way I once was. But I find that a lot of the products now are just better or different versions of the same products we've been seeing. I really didn't see that change much this year. I didn't see anything I would consider a game changer on the floor this year. There were, again, lots of LED, good, bad, and indifferent. Lots of LED companies were showing. There are starting to be some smaller LED-based robotic lights that are actually really nice. They're downsizing the packages. They're putting more functions in the smaller packages, which is all nice, especially for things like the worship market, where it's smaller sized venues and you don't need arena punch. You don't need something that's the equivalent of a 1200 watt profile spot if you're in a venue with 16-foot ceilings and a 20-foot wide stage.
Yeah, I was going to say they're making, I think, probably more for the corporate buyer than the entertainment buyer, right? Like
exactly. Yeah, that stuff's starting to roll in. Yeah, lots of nice stuff for ballrooms. Both Elation and High End have new smaller package lights that include things like shutters and more advanced functions and smaller packages that are great for that kind of thing, for ballrooms and smaller worship facilities and that type of application. So that's a nice move that I saw. There is some movement in what the manufacturers are doing service-wise. There was actually a lot of talk on the floor, especially from the other people who are in the management of various lighting companies that I ran into, who were talking about where service is going for the fixtures. Some companies have really good service. Some companies have so-so service. Some manufacturers are actually moving service out of the U.S. at this point, and that's not a good thing. Generally speaking, the consensus is, moving your service to Mexico versus having it here in the continental United States is making some folks nervous. People are wondering how that's going to affect what's happening as far as them being able to get their lights serviced in a prompt way, in a good way. So
yeah, that's a pretty major thing in terms of just getting stuff in and out the country, time frames, turnaround. When it comes to downtime on a product.
Yep.
That'll be an interesting approach, especially if they don't have like a backfill solution to get you in a temporary posture while they're going through the rigmarole of that new process. So speaking of LED, like you said, there was a ton of it there. I've noticed that trend just attending InfoComm, that the LED section and environment is growing and growing and growing with names that I have no clue, but they're all from Shenzhen. So, is obviously you said that's happening at LDI. Why is that a bad thing?
I honestly don't think it's a bad thing. Now I do think that there are definitely levels of product. There is much like the lighting industry. There are definite lines you can draw where these guys are pro product, these guys are semi-pro product, these guys are a commercial only install product. We're not going to take this stuff and try and troop it because we know it's not going to hold up. I don't think it's bad. I think in the next few years, we're going to see the same thing as we've seen happening in the lighting industry, where the sub-pro, consumer pro market stuff is starting to catch up to the pro market. Because it's all like, let's face it, we all know it's all manufactured on the same 3 or 4 lines.
Yeah.
It's not, there aren't actually that many manufacturers. It's just different people doing different specs for the gear and putting it together in a slightly different way.
Right.
So I think there will be a convergence. We'll see how it, I think it will flatten out. I think this incredible proliferation we're seeing currently will go back down to where we have a few good players, and a lot of these newcomers and people who are trying to gain market share are going to realize there actually isn't that much market share to be gained. So
yeah, no, I agree with the prosumer assessment. Like we had that same run, like you say, with LED lights, where it was like, all right, a handful, then you had the major players, and then you had everybody putting out some form of fixture. And now you kind of got it streamlined to where at least you still got the low grade, but at least that mid tier has upped the product to where it's more of a prosumer product than,
right.
The true consumer model. So I was curious about that with LED because, the driving point seems to be that the mil spec is getting smaller. The quality is getting better, and there seems to be more options. So is that driving a price point to where it's making it more affordable. But there's a number of questions behind that we'll deal with on another show of durability, longevity, and all types of stuff related to that. So it's interesting that there was more presence.
Yeah, I do think it's definitely getting more affordable, and I think we'll see that trend continue. If for no other reason than there's more and more product on the market. I see a lot of these folks. I see a lot of these folks who are primarily digital signage providers, doing it for commercial grade digital sign installs versus pro grade entertainment type installs. And in my mind, those are two very different markets that there are some companies trying to say, well, we do digital signage, therefore you can use our stuff in the entertainment market. And I don't necessarily see that working because of all the things you mentioned, the reliability, the troopability, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but I do think prices are going to come down, if for no other reason of the incredible proliferation of the amount of material available in the marketplace.
Right. Yeah, and from that differentiation of, the products you've seen out there from a digital signage standpoint to fitting the live event corporate entertainment space, is the difference just because one product looks real pretty when you install it and don't move it, and the other one's not portable?
Exactly. Okay. That's a very big part of it. I can, if some of the viewers will understand what I'm about to say. Some of them will think I'm talking ancient history, but there was a time when Verilight and Morpheus were the only two companies with moving lights, and nobody else had them. And over a period of 5 to 10 years, once high-end got involved and a couple of other manufacturers got involved and we saw a proliferation of moving lights, suddenly it was something that, first every large rock and roll lighting company had moving lights, and then your regional companies had them, and now pretty much everybody has a decent inventory of moving fixtures of one type or another. I think we're going to see that same kind of thing happen with the LED technology, where it's been, up to this point, it's been kind of specialty providers and the guys who specialize in LED screens providing it. I think we're going to start seeing that shift where it's going to start trickling down into the smaller AV companies and the more regional providers getting into it because the price point allows it and the consumers are demanding it.
Interesting. So from the speed that technology is evolving and improving, and I'll use those words because you said, essentially you didn't see anything that was game changing, at the show. And I wonder, is that because, now because, over the years you had email, but now you got social tools, you got YouTube, you got, video mechanisms. We hear and see products far more faster and more often than we did when they used to have to just come to your shop and show it to you. So from an evolution of improvement on products that we kind of already know about or seen or understand the idea of the technology, do you feel that the show is one that you need to go to every year at the current pace at which technology is improving, or do you feel like you can do it every other year, or is it,
I would say if you are going to the show for the technology, don't hate me, LDI folks, but if you are going to the show for the technology, I would say every other year is probably A, is more sustainable, and B, makes more sense.
Okay.
I just, the year to year small step improvement in products, I think every second year you could go and maybe actually see something that made you go, oh wow, that's a huge improvement over what I saw 2 years ago, versus if you go every year, you're seeing those incremental steps between things, and you never see anything that makes you go, wow, because you've seen the development that led up to the new product.
Right.
Having said that, there is a whole segment of the industry who uses LDI as their chance to get together and see each other and talk and, do crosstalk that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and have a bunch of people in the room that normally wouldn't be in a room together other than at LDI. And from that standpoint, I think it's a very valuable thing to go every year, just to get caught up with those folks and to get caught up with the manufacturers and make sure you aren't missing something.
Yeah, I totally agree with that aspect. It definitely is fun when you get to the show and you're around a bunch of like-minded people that, understand what each other do and are collectively looking at a product and are able to just have conversation, analyzing it together. Those people are competitors when they leave the building, but in that environment, the guards are let down, the friendships are open, and you do generally on the show floor have the opportunity to learn a lot of good information and share some ideas directly with the manufacturers that could improve the product for next year or down the road, or develop a new product. So, from not attending the show just because the technology hasn't changed or evolved, I don't think that should stop you from, like you said, going to network, being around people to continue that learning. Because also outside of the trade show floor, I didn't get to do a comparison to 2016, but I went through all the courses for 2017, and they have a great lineup of education sessions that are different from a lot of other conferences that cater to the live event community as well, to where there is a tremendous amount of education that could be had at the show as well, all throughout the week leading up to the weekend trade show.
Oh, there absolutely is. We as a company, we actually have a person who is our head of education and technology, who does nothing but educational sessions in the greater Michigan area for us, and provides that kind, who was there doing a QLab session with Jeremy Hopgood at the show. And they did an in-depth, I believe they did 3 days on QLab while they were there. And it's that kind of thing that you don't really see it much anywhere else. That's really nice. Same thing for, learning console programming and some really good media server sessions. I agree with you wholeheartedly on all of that. And I did want to jump back when you started that last part. You said something that made me think, and that is that one thing I love about this business is we're all competitors. We all, get in there and swing against each other when we're in those RFQ situations and we're bidding against each other and trying to win the work. But generally speaking, we're also all very friendly, and we're all really good at talking to each other and coming together to try and make the industry better and make sure kind of everybody's on the same page. And I really do appreciate that about our industry. It's not being involved in any other industries. I don't know that we're particularly unique, but it does make me feel good about where we're at as an industry.
Yeah, our industry has a great, strong sense of community, especially when we're together and trying to sort out our own problems and make it better. So that is an awesome thing about what we do. So last question here. So in your perspective, like a first timer who's been in the industry but never been to the show, or somebody new to the industry attending LTI for the first time, what is it that they can really go to the show and be looking to take away from it?
I would say if you're a first timer new to the industry, spend the money, get the education pass, and go to the educational sessions. There are folks there leading those educational sessions and even some of the discussion sessions that you're just not going to get the opportunity to hear from and to be around. So definitely take advantage of that. The other thing I would say is when you're on the floor and you're looking at technologies and you're viewing the booths and you're seeing all the new gadgets and all the new wireless DMX stuff and all of that, listen to the conversations that you might not be a part of, but that are going on between the manufacturers and the people who are coming to their booths, who are talking to them on a different level. You can tell when the manufacturer's talking to a guy they know has something to say. Listen to those conversations, because those are the kind of things that as a newcomer, as a younger person in the business, you don't get exposure to those type of conversations very often.
Yep.
And if you can take advantage of being on that exhibit floor to hear some of those kinds of conversations, I think it can give you a really good perspective in what's going on and where you might want to focus. And of course, look at the technology, because there's lots of really fun, good technology out there to be impressed by.
No, that's some great input, great feedback for, again, those who are young, new in the industry, or haven't been to the show before to be able to take away. So cool. Well, Doyle, thanks for coming back on and sharing that insight. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure, Wallace.
Yep. And for those who are want to see the show notes of some of the links to things we talked about, we got some links there of the LDI award winners, long slideshow of the new products, and also pulled a video of GLP's awesome booth demo to where they, as Doyle described, they set up these booths with designers, outside designers that come in and design and actually program for these booths. So it's some awesome showcases going on that I'll have links to in the show notes. So again, thank you for listening. If you're listening on iTunes or watching on YouTube, don't want to miss an episode, be sure you subscribe to those. And if you love the show, please leave us a review and rating on iTunes to tell us how awesome we are. If you have any suggestions or topics or guests that you want to be on the show, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at WallaceETS, or you can reach me at wallace@wljconsulting.com. Until next time, thank you for listening to The Live Life.
Thank you.